Hello Internet, and welcome to my live reaction for Fairy Tail 100 Years Quest, Chapter 118. When we last left our heroes, the last of the Dogger cores had finally been destroyed thanks to a bit of quick thinking on Gajiel's part, allowing Natsu and Suzaku to start to get an edge in their fight against Dogramag. They were pushed back a good deal once Dogramag returned to his dragon form and encased them within the earth, but they were able to break free, and thanks to a unison raid between Natsu and Suzaku, thanks to Natsu being given Suzaku's sword, was able to do at least some significant damage to Dogramag. It's a little bit unclear if this is the end of the fight, and even if it is, I certainly hope this is not the end of Dogramag as a character, given the sort of import he was given to the series plot does not really fit how quickly he'd be removed from the plot. But it does feel like we're reaching the end of this Labyrinth arc thanks to that move, so let's see what happens here in Chapter 118, Collapsing Labyrinth. Though also that reminds me, there are still a number of questions that have been raised about the Labyrinth, as like Elefsaria posited why the Labyrinth even exists here. So there still is plenty to be done with Dogramag as a character, I think. But anyway, our picture here is Natsu, like, roaring. His victory roar rattles the earth, which definitely implies this is the end of the arc. But yeah, Dogramag takes that hit and is, like, falling apart. As Natsu, finishes the blow, Suzaku just grins in, like, satisfaction at Dogramag's defeat. It can't be me losing to a human? I really, we see him, the light starting to explode from within him. I really hope Dogramag does not die. But Natsu tells him, it's because you're looking down from up top that you don't get it. And Dogramag looks at him, whether we're human or dragon, we're still alive, aren't we? We can be friends, or parent and child, but our strength won't ever change. I'm not quite sure what that has to do with any of this. Like, the parent and child bit might work with Ignia, given their shared relationship with Ignia, but this doesn't really seem to be the sort of thing Natsu is talking about at all throughout this arc. So I'm not sure, because you're looking down from up top, fits Dogramag's whole I'm so much better than you vibe he had all through the fight. But the rest of it just feels weird. I'm not sure how that ties into anything going on here. But Dogramag just, moans, and he hits the ground and mutters, I see now. That's why Ignia is so obsessed with you. Wait, is Dogramag actually dying here? That's just such a weird choice. But the seeds have been sown. The age of humans will soon come to an end. The rest is up to you, Ignia. And we see the labyrinth starts to collapse. And Natsu, is shocked as he hears the labyrinth behind him crumble. Which, I guess that means Dogramag's done. Which, again, just feels anticlimactic. It feels like he was teased as, an equal threat with Ignia. It'd be one thing to be he's weakened because of the Dogger cores and him being recently dead, so he sort of has to retreat. But him dying? I don't think that, I talked earlier today about the Akinoella thing in Eden Zero, and, that maybe I could see working depending on where the story goes next. But this, I don't know. It's just weird, and I don't think it's well done. But there is that moment, the age of humans will soon come to an end. Because that whose age is it has sort of circled around the series really since Celine's introduction. How when she ends up allying with Diabolos, she talks about how it's time for the age of dragons to end and an age of humans to fully begin. Which is the exact opposite of what Dogramag is implying here. That we are in the age of humans and it's time for it to come to an end for a new age of dragons. As frustrated as I am with Dogramag sort of leaving, that's a really interesting germ of an idea that I hope to see grow. But Natsu calls out, the labyrinth! It's falling apart! And they're both lying down. They're both pretty much done. And Suzaku tries to move. This is bad. I can no longer move. And Natsu tells himself, just gotta get that fighting spirit. And then a rock just falls on his head and knocks him out. Bye, Natsu. He's gone for now. And some more rocks start to... A whole, not a landslide, but rocks start to crumble towards Suzaku as he just notes, regrettable. And then they all freeze there, and Misaki comes in, still standing, barely standing after her fight with Urza. But she saves Suzaku there. Shocking Suzaku, Misaki! And Misaki tells him, Kirin and the others have escaped. That just leaves you two. And Haku calls out to him, hurry, this way! And Suzaku looks back at the unconscious Natsu. And we see it's... All of a sudden it appears that Diabolos is much more friendly with Fairy Tail than they have been. Suzaku makes sense, given his allyship with Natsu for the past several chapters. Won't you also help Natsu, this fellow? But Misaki then says, of course. No one's getting left behind. And, that worked that works with Suzaku, and it kind of worked with Kiria earlier, given her sort of, infatuation with Loxus and the sort of, rivalry she's had with Urza. I could see in typical shonen fashion how that could lead to friendship. But this also feels weird. We'll see what Mashima does with this for the rest of the chapter, but it just feels weird. But we see the Labyrinth, as the title suggests, collapsing around everyone. But everyone else is outside, with the exception of the four still in the Labyrinth. And we check in on them as they all react. Happy looks around, an earthquake, and Lucy shrieks, Eep! And Urza comments, it's a big one. And the crow tells them, you must protect Sir Eleftheria. I'm on it. And we see Celine, unconscious at this point. Still brutally damaged after her fight with Ignia. As Kiria tells her, hey, don't die on us, Celine. And then we see Sai, who apparently did not escape with... Oh, right, because it was God Serena that left, but then they actually fought Sai. So Sai was, lying on the ground there. As Gajil and Lily note him as he runs away. Time to make my godly escape! And Gajil recognizes him. Hey, it's that guy! But Lily just stops him, leave him be. And Wendy, clutches onto Carla. It'll be alright, Carla. Which is the sort of thing Wendy's clearly saying for herself and not for Carla. As Carla notes, very calmly, you're hurting me, Wendy. And Mr. Crow calls out, the labyrinth is crumbling! And Lucy looks up, thinking of Natsu. Natsu. And from the entrance, we see Mad Mole and Kirin and Scullion make their escape, as well as Misaki and Haku. Haku having turned Natsu and Suzaku into dolls, so that he can carry them better, which is a nice use of his power. Thanks Haku for that one. And then turns them back into people, as Fairy Tail is just relieved to see Natsu alright. Everyone kind of celebrates. Kiria gives us this little, sigh of relief, as the labyrinth finally crumbles. Finally gone with Dogramag's true death. And we get a bit of narration here. That earthquake shook the entire continent of Giltena. In some areas, they say it was so large that it reshaped the land. What could the earthquake, the collapse of the great labyrinth of Dogramag, mean? At the time, we still had no way of knowing. And then we cut to a lake that might be where the labyrinth was? Or no, this is Diabolos' base. We went to the Wizard Guild Diabolos, so we could treat Eleftheria and Celine. Both our guilds made peace with each other. Or at least that was the idea. And we see a very tense dinner. Everyone's sort of, bandaged up. Though, is that Scullion in, a suit and tie and his, weird little skull helmet? That is such a great little costume choice, if I'm right. But Loxus and Kirin are, not friends here. As Loxus just mutters, haven't you had enough yet? Huh? And Lucy is trying to, defuse this fight. Come on, Loxus, stop it! But Kirin just wants a rematch here. I couldn't get serious with my magic in a cramped up place like that. Okay, Kirin, whatever you say. And Natsu joins in very heavily. His entire left eye covered in bandages, his head, both his arms, his chest. Hey, come on and fight me, Loxus. And Lucy just mutters, why do you want in on it? But Kirin continues to, like, defend his guild after their defeat in the Labyrinth. Even Misaki can get more serious in a wider space. But that doesn't seem to fit Misaki's, like, powers of, like, alternate dimension use. Okay, whatever you say. But Misaki then comments, I truly do have to admit defeat, however. After all, the only girlies I've met who are stronger than me are you and Celine. And Urza just, like, girlies? And there is a certain amount of, like, about, like, the heart in her text to Urza. There's a bit of homoeroticism there in Misaki, which maybe fits her the bit of the dynamic we've seen between her and Kiria, but it feels a little just Diabolos all of a sudden being friends with everyone is a little out of the blue. As tense as this dinner is, I don't know. I'll talk more about that at the end of the chapter, I think. But Wendy questions, does this mean you're Giltena's number one female wizard, Miss Misaki? Which this feels like the sister build-up. And Haku still, I like that they haven't, like, as Diabolos is all of a sudden, like, presented in a bit more of a better light, we're not forgiving Haku for being a bit of a creep. As I thought, Wendy's so smart, I'm gonna pat your head. And Carla thankfully, like, steps in. You will do no such thing. And Suzaku notes, well, as a wizard she is. And Kiria, and that's a Scullion's line, actually. That Kiria snaps at him, what the hell? Are you picking on Miss Misaki, Scullion? But Madmol fills in, this continent has an alchemist guild that stands on par with the wizard guilds. Oh, so yeah, it is sister build-up. And Happy questions, alchemy? And Lily's heard of it. Oh yeah, that. It's the power to change matter into other things. And Happy, ever happy. Huh? Can an uncooked burned fish? How should I know? And I'm starting to notice a weird thing in, like, the typesetting in this whole translation. All of these little, like, effects feel weirdly placed. Like, the heart in Misaki's line on the previous page and a little bit too close to the line above it. The little sweat drops are, like coinciding with the K in no in Lily's line. It's a weird thing going on here. But Gray and Gajil know about alchemy at this point. As they settle, now that everything's calmed down, they remember, that's right, Gray thinks. There was a guy like that hanging around. And Gajil knows that damn God Serena was there. With that guild. Oh yeah, it's time for everyone to find out about God Serena, because at this point, only Gajil knows. And Urza tells him he's supposed to be dead. I'm telling you, he's alive. And Wendy speaks up. No, he is not. And that sudden, firmness shocks the group. And we see, after, Wendy's embarrassed for a minute, that it was actually Irene speaking through her. And she gets back to what my initial concern was, that we had already seen God Serena's Historia. As she says to Wendy, God Serena is indeed dead. Nine Hearts magic does not lie. A Historia is a spell that gives form to the dead only. Living people cannot materialize as a Historia. Okay, so that then raises the question. What is the deal with him? And I suppose, I don't think I directly made this comparison, though, this theory, though it's weird if I didn't. Human transmutation? Is this human transmutation? Because that would allow him to be dead, and to come back to life. With alchemy, it all sort of fits together, if that's the route Mashima's going here. But when he tries to play off her comment, I'm fairly sure someone from Alakatasia confirmed that he died. And Kirin adds on, if it's about the dead coming alive, then Wraith from our guild was the same in a way. Yeah, but Wraith was also, incorporeal in the way that God Serena wasn't. But Kirin not, the only real member of Diabolos not letting this peace thing lie. And you guys killed him. And Loxus just snapped, want me to kill you too? But Scullion defends Fairy Tail. Wraith achieved what we call entering Nirvana. And Madmol comments, Cha. He even left a will for us, Cha. But Kiria adds on, basically he was already dead. And Lucy comments, you guys had a dead guy for a guildmate? And Misaki says the exact term I was theorizing. The dead man you saw was most likely a product of human transmutation. And Gray questions, human transmutation? And Scullion tells him, we don't know the details, but alchemy has the potential to bring the dead back to life. Now, to keep the FMA comparisons going here, there's always the cost, right? Like, in FMA, in the manga, it's physically impossible to do that. And in the anime, they came back different. They came back homunculi. And, I'm not saying we have to, follow FMA's basic concept of human transmutation here, but there is a distinctive possibility that there is something, that the God Serena that was and the God Serena that is are fundamentally different in some way. But Suzaku then stops all this. Our talk has gone far off track. Now is the time we talk of what comes next. It's time to get, there's still a lot of forces at play. Even if we're at the end of Dogramag, there still is a lot going on. But Haku tells everyone, well, we're all friends now, so it's fine if we get along. And Natsu is always raring for a fight. If it's a rematch you're looking for, I'll take you all on at once. But Lucy tells him this is a very complex subject, so don't you dare. But Suzaku tells them all, to begin, you lot from Fairy Tail aim to defeat the 5 dragon gods. In other words, killing Selene with them. Whereas our goal is to protect Selene, so she may build the world she so desires. Okay, so at first I thought they were sort of allies with Selene out of fear, but we see they genuinely do agree with her sort of world for humans, world beyond the need of dragons. Though, I don't think their goals are that different. Because, this next panel has Team Natsu, reacting in horror. Huh? Doesn't that make us look like the bad guys? But, we've already seen them leave some of the dragon gods alive. They left Merphobia alive, just removed of his powers. That could easily end up happening to Selene. Because Selene herself kind of wants that. She wants to live her life as an ordinary human. That was what she said when she took over Diabolos. So I don't think that killing Selene, if Selene truly redeems herself, which I found a little weird, which I think I'll talk about as the whole quick redemption thing, as a whole throughout the arc, at the end of the video. But my point is that I don't think killing Selene must be mandatory. Because Lucy questions, what kind of world does Selene want? And Scullion tells her, she wishes to rid the world of all dragons, and live quietly as a human. Which again, is sort of very much in line with the gang's goals here. But Urza pushes back, even so, she's someone who's wreaked havoc upon all sorts of worlds. And Gray adds on, just trusting her isn't that simple. But Kiria defends her. She was desperate enough to help you back at the Labyrinth, wasn't she? And Natsu thinks for a second and stands up. Yeah, I get it. And Lucy questions, Natsu? It means we were all wrong. It doesn't matter if they're human or dragon. We gotta look at their hearts and decide. That's how we move forward, right? To be continued. Okay. So I'm gonna talk a bit about this resolution. And a bit about... It's a complaint that came up way back at the beginning of 100 Years Quest. Of how, weird it was for Natsu to be willing to go, dragon killing, given his own past. And I think, the idea that the 5 dragon gods are a big enough threat makes me, willing to believe that. But the idea that this is some, big resolution, this is some big revelation to Natsu, is a little weird. Given that, I think Merphobia sort of colors a lot of this. Because they've already met good dragons. Or good dragon gods, even. Not even just good dragons, which of course they met with Ignia and Grandini and Weislogia and Scullion and Metallicana. I think those are their names. Not Scullion. Skiadrum. That was Rogue's dragon's name. Good dragons exist. We know this. And so, this feels like a point... And especially after meeting Merphobia, Natsu should have reached ages ago. And it adds this very weird feeling to this resolution. We're going to transition over to that now. Because it really does feel, all of a sudden, everyone's sort of being friends. Maybe part of it, I'm trying to like collect my thoughts on the fly here, and it's a little difficult because it's a complicated thought. But like all throughout this arc, we've seen sort of sudden turns. You know, like I earlier in the chapter, Kiria, the previous page, Kiria has this line. She was desperate enough to help you back at the Labyrinth, wasn't she? Which, like, in the context of the scene, is just not a defense. That is not a defense to trusting her long term. She was desperate. But also, it's an interesting little read there, because, let me rephrase that. Start that thought over. Is that, like, the fact that she was allied with Fairy Tail did not feel like a redemption moment, but like I'm desperate. If we don't do this, Dogramag kills us. And so, like, on the surface, that sort of makes sense. I always found, ever since we found out about her true motivations, they were always a little weird. Like, as Urza points out, this doesn't really gel with what we already know, like what we saw Celine do back in Elantir. Like, that just doesn't quite track. But and the same can sort of be said for, like, the whole being all buddy-buddy with Diabolos here. Part of it is that, like, we're time to move on to a new enemy guild, with Gold Owl. But even so, this whole thing feels like Suzaku being, like, telling Misaki, save Natsu, we become sort of companions at this point, and, you know, we share these same ideals. That all sort of works for me. But the fact that, like, Misaki already saw that as a matter of course feels a little weird. I mean, like, it'd be one thing if, like, because Suzaku was a really interesting character for me at first, because he was very much presented in a similar vein to Natsu. If it weren't for the fact that they were, on opposing guilds, they would have gotten along very well. They would have these same sort of ideals of the value of your friends. And so their eventual alliance made a lot of sense. They have a lot of similarities. And I think maybe if we had seen that throughout Diabolos as a whole, it might have worked a little better. A sort of, we were enemies because of circumstance, and now that the circumstances change, I'm more than happy to be buddies with you. And we saw that a little bit with the Kiria Misaki thing at the very beginning of the Labyrinth arc. But I'm still just not quite sure it all worked out in the way Mashima... It feels like Mashima wanted it to. Which, it's a shame to come down kind of hard on, like, 2 Mashima chapters in the same day. But it still just isn't quite working for me. There's still a lot of interesting things. I find Gold Owl to be a very interesting potential enemy... Or, not potential, but future enemy. And then, like I brought up earlier, the sort of age comment that Dogramag makes is very interesting. But... I don't know, both Dogramag, and, like, the thing about Dogramag here, is it is not that, like, Dogramag's defeat here rings hollow, it's just the fact that it felt like he had a lot more to do in the story, especially with what Eleftheria was wondering about the existence of the Labyrinth, and for him to just already be gone, it just feels weird. I don't know, like, it's just not clicking in a certain way. Because he definitely is gone. This is not like the Eden Zero chapter where I'm not quite sure if she's actually dead. Like, Dogramag is gone. Dogramag is dead for real this time. And I firmly believe that. And so it just makes it all a little... I don't know. It feels weird. It's another sort of miss of an arc ending. Like, the thing with 100 Years Quest is that a lot of it is very, very good. But also, at this point, this is the end of the 4th arc. And at this point, it really only has one arc that ends well. Like, the Alderaan arc's ending is really good, it's really climactic, it brings all the many threads of that arc together in a satisfying manner. The Mercphobia arc felt like a cop-out, felt like it removed all of, like, the high drama of having to, like, kill someone who was basically good, but, like, couldn't help the pain they were causing. The Alta Faith stuff was just kind of boring. And then we have this, that feels just weirdly anticlimactic. As an end for Dogramag. I don't know, it's because there's so much in each of those arcs is really fucking strong. And then there's all sort of leaning into this blah ending. And that's the complaint a lot of people had with Fairy Tail in its original series, but I don't think that was really true in the original series. Like, with some exceptions, the end of arcs tend to be pretty damn good. There would be some fights that would not quite hit the mark here and there, but by and large, good shit. And most, if not all, of the arc climaxes. But I don't know. It's a weird thing. I'm not quite sure where I'm going with any of this. Because much like those other arcs, there's still plenty here to sort of whet the appetite. You know, the Mercphobia arc had the coming arrival of Toka/Ferris, which we didn't know was her name at the time, of course. The Selene arc had her arrival on Earthland. This arc has the whole Age of Dragons and Gold Owl line. So there's, I don't know, I'm really trying to be more positive on this chapter, and there's some fun stuff here. You know, building up a lot of good foreshadowing with alchemy and human transmutation and Dogramag's age comments. But it does just feel like the sudden peace. I don't know, maybe I can take it as like if it were presented a bit more as an uncomfortable alliance, they're all trying to heal from their wounds, and they're all sort of opposed to Ignia at this point. Like, if it didn't feel like we were meant to view them as friends, and instead we're meant to view them as, like, uncomfortable allies, that would work a little better, but, like, with the exception of Loxus and Kirin, they're sort of presented as if all is forgiven, all is friends now. And, like, Suzaku brings up a good... Like, maybe that is what Mashima was getting at, and I just misread it. Because, like, now that I look at it again, Suzaku brings up some, like, you know, antagonistic points here towards the gang at the end of the chapter. But it does feel weirdly friendly. As opposed to the sort of, like... Especially as they're leaving the Labyrinth. And then we get this, it doesn't matter if they're human or dragon, we gotta look at their hearts and decide, which does just feel sort of... Like, we knew this was a big point in the original series. But I don't know, we'll see, like... I'm still curious, I imagine Diabolos is gonna come into play, especially when we deal with Ignia. We still know nothing about Viernes. I don't know if, like, Ignia is... Because at this point, there are 2 dragon gods left. One of them could easily be the big bad, and, like, the final enemy of the series. And one of them is a complete unknown at this point. We've heard nothing of the Gold Dragon God since he was introduced. So, you know, the structure in the series is still, like, fun enough that I'm very excited to see what happens next. It's just this arc feels like it doesn't quite stick the landing to me. There are parts where, like, if it were slightly tweaked, it could work. But it just kind of misses, is my thoughts here. So with that said, I'm going to leave this video off here. Hope you'll enjoy the chapter and the video itself. And if you did, feel free to drop me a like or subscribe or, you know, do whatever makes it happy, you know? And as always, your life is your own, okay? Bye!